Hey everybody, you are watching CAD Roll Hunter, and I had the chance to buy a coin collection. There's all sorts of goodies in here. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is James, and you're watching my channel CAD Roll Hunter. And I had the chance to buy a coin collection. Somebody reached out to me and asked if I was interested. We settled on a really fair price, I think. But I don't completely know what's in here. I had a chance to look through it a little bit. And you can see in here we've got some King George nickels. There's some large cents. There's wooden nickels. There's some commemorative medallions. We've got some paper money. I saw there's a few consecutive $2 bills in pretty good condition in there. There's some nickel dollars. There's all sorts of stuff. I'm really excited to get in. I think what I'm going to do is take all the envelopes and bags of stuff and set them out, and I'll lay out all of the loose stuff first, and we'll try to get a sense of what we got in here, and I'm really excited. And it's even got a nickel pincher. This is something, if you're Canadian, you'd recognize. The Royal Bank used to put coins in these. You can still get them every once in a while, so that's really cool. All right, well, let's get started and see what we got. Okay, well, we've spilled out all of the loose stuff, and it's interesting. We've got some King George the Sixth. Some of the stuff looks like the steel ones. Yeah, that's a 1944 Victory nickel. And you can see that sometimes they'll start to rust. There's a King George the Fifth nickel. That's a 1929. There's some bunny commemoratives. There's some international coins. There's some wooden nickels and all sorts of goodies, I think, in here. In order to see what we got, what I'm going to do is just kind of separate all of this stuff out, and we'll see what the most interesting stuff is. Oh, there's a King George the Fifth penny back there. Don't know if it's going to be a key date. We didn't see anything when we looked through it. This looks to be something in the 30s. I'm going to have to put it to the light to really get a good read. That's 1936. So that's pretty cool. King George the Fifth. It's got some corrosion or damage on it. But yeah, we'll look through here. I'll sort all this stuff out and we'll see what we can find. Okay, so I started to lay it out from all the loose stuff here, and you can see there's all sorts of cool stuff. We've got some King George the Fifth nickels. We've got lots of King George the Sixth. We got some steel chromium-plated nickels, and some, there's a few small cents, older small cents, even a Newfoundland cent. All sorts of cool stuff. And we got a stack of large cents, which is really cool. But kind of looking through some of these other envelopes, I think there's a lot of the same sort of stuff in here. And I think the only way that it's going to make sense is for me to actually open up all of them and really separate them out and go through it with you by denomination. Just otherwise, we're just going to keep finding nickels here and nickels there and nickels everywhere. So I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to get everything out of these envelopes and start to organize it. And we'll go through things, the Canadian stuff, by denomination, and then we'll look at what other interesting finds we have here. All right, that took me a little bit of effort, but I've got everything laid out, and on the main mat here, I've got all of the coin-related finds, and then off to the side, I've got some of the non-coin-related finds. Actually, there are a few things on here, some medallions and some other tokens and things like that I thought were a little bit more interesting I'll look at, but this is most of it. And up at the very top, I've got all of the pennies lined up, the 1 cent pieces. So in the top left corner, the large cents, followed by, there's a few King George the Fifth small cents, and then the rest of the small cents here. And so we'll start with the cents before we go to the rest, and we'll take a peek at what we've got. Okay, here are the large cents, starting with the very oldest one, this 1886 Queen Victoria. It's got some heavy damage to it. You can see somebody tried to punch a hole through it, and it's got another sort of pinhole over here. And then in the Edward the Seventh, we've got a 1903. There's an undated one, pretty rough. This is an 06, also pretty slick. An 07H, and this is probably the best of the finds in the large cents. The 07H is only minted at 800,000, and this one is in fairly slick condition, but I've seen worse for sure, but it's a low mint coin. I'm really happy to get that one. We got an 08. We've got a few 1910s, and this one here might be the best condition coin. Actually, yeah, this is pretty decent in this group here. We've got a 13, a 14. There's a couple of 16s. This 16 is actually quite lovely. There's King George VI. That's maybe in a VG. You can see some of the band of the crown is worn away. And then we've got a few 1917s, a 1918, and a 1920, which is the last year for the large cents. Next up, we got a few small cents from King George V. That's really cool. There's a 32, a 33, and a 36. This one's got some corrosion on it. And that's unfortunate because the coin itself is actually would be in a pretty decent grade. You can see the fold bound to the crown, so that's probably an F or a VF if it was gradable, but it's got some environmental damage, unfortunately. Otherwise, these aren't key dates. These are fairly common, but again, these are not the kinds of things that you can come by normally in coin roll hunting. This one's actually in pretty decent shape. You can see the full band of the crown, so that's maybe in an F at least. And but yeah, 1933 Canada 1 cent, small cent, King George V, really cool. Next up, we got a pretty big stack of 1940s pennies. Now, of course, these you can see are all in pretty circulated condition, but there are a few varieties we can look for on these ones. So I'll pull them out and we'll scope them up so we can see them a little bit more closely together. So first up on our 1947 maple leaves, and remember these are minted in 1948 when the mint was trying to get dies, updated dies that removed the reference to being the Emperor of India. But there are two date varieties in the 47 maple leaves, and that's a blunt 7 or a pointed 7, and it's really referring to this part of the 7 here. Now, when they are circulated and worn like this one is, it gets harder to tell whether that is actually pointed or if it's actually blunt. I can't really say for certain. This might be the blunt 7. Neither of them is particularly rare. They're actually both fairly common. I think the blunt 7 has a little bit of a premium over the pointed 7, but really only in mint state coins. And in this grade, it's essentially a penny. So that's the 47s. And there's also the 48s and 49s out of some varieties we can look for too. And so we did get a handful of the 48s and 49s, so we can check them for the variety, the A between denticles or A pointing to denticles. And let's start with the 48s. So in the 48s, there are three varieties. There's the A pointing to a small denticle. There's an A pointing to a large denticle. That's the one we have here. There's the A in gratia pointing to a large denticle and an A pointing between large denticles. The one we really want to find is the A points to a small denticle, and these denticles would just be like thin little lines as opposed to like larger, rounded, long denticles. So this one is just a common variety. We got another one we can check. This is an A pointing between. And this one here, if we rotate it all the way around, is an A pointing to. So we found two of the three varieties, but not the uncommon, more rare one. And here's the 49 up on screen. There are two varieties here. It's basically A pointing between denticles or A pointing to denticle, and it's the pointing to denticle that is uncommon and rare. This is pointing between, so you can see that A is basically pointing between these two denticles. So that's not the rare one. And I gotta rotate this one around too. That's pointing between. It would help if I had oriented these all properly to start. Oh, maybe I did. I just started in the wrong spot. That's A pointing between. And this last one is A pointing between. So we got 4 of the 49s, and all 4 of them were the same common variety. So we have a short stack of coins in the 50s here. And there are some varieties in the 53, 54, and 55 we could be looking for with respect to the shoulder fold versus no shoulder fold. But we don't have any of those here. In fact, Monty's dad was collecting coins that only had King George or earlier. And so this is actually in an envelope that said coins with kings and birds. So we didn't get any of the laureate portrait Queen Elizabeth where we could find those varieties. And speaking of the birds, here they are here. The 1967s, so there's a bunch of them. Most of them, again, are in pretty circulated condition. We can see one bright and shiny one there. That's cool. I did scope them all to see if they had the doubled die obverse or any of that dye deterioration on the date that we could find, and there was none of it on any of these coins. Particularly what we would be looking for would be doubling. It's rotated hub doubling on the obverse legend, particularly on Regina here. And we don't see that at all. And the other interesting one we could find, which isn't a double die, would be that dye deterioration doubling on the dates. And you could see some pretty significant doubling all across here. And we didn't find that on any of these either. Last up for the pennies is a stack of more modern pennies. I think these are all copper, so there's really no zinc cents in here at all, or steel cents. And then a roll of what is mostly uncirculated 1992s, although when I got this, the first 5 or 6 of these coins were actually out and were sort of in the general population, so to speak. But the rest of them, this is the mint wrapping. This is what some of these come in from the mint, is this sort of shrink wrap plastic tube, which is kind of unusual. Not like the special mint wrap rolls when you buy collector's edition. They're in really nicely colored paper rolls, wrappers. But this is what they look like. So I expect that most of these down to just the end are pretty uncirculated. There might be some really nice versions of them in there. And you can see there's some toning on the ones at the end that were out that probably suggest they've probably been separated from this package for a number of years. All right, we'll get started with the nickels, and there are a lot of nickels here, so this is really cool. So first up, that really small one on the left, that's a pretty damaged 1918 5-cent piece. They used to be called fish scales because they're so small and so thin, but that's sterling silver, so that's really cool. So it's at least worth the silver melt value, even though there's really no numismatic value in that kind of condition. And then next up, we got a bunch of King George V nickels. I love this design. I've bought a few small collections in the past with these kinds of nickels, and I really love them. And I've actually very recently found some of these, were one particularly a 1935 in a coin roll hunt that I did with North Central Coins. I'll put a link up to that so you can see me finding the 1935. And I found a 29 as well in one of my hunts. But we got a 28, a couple of 29s, a couple of 31s, a 32, and a 36. And none of these are key dates. The key dates are 25 and 26. We didn't get any of those. But some of these are actually in pretty good condition. I'll grab this last one here, the last year, King George V, 1936. And this one's probably in a VG. You can actually see all of the band of the crown. I think there might be one in here that might be even nicer than that, but they're actually pretty cool coins. And then right next to it are a couple of 1937 with the dot. That's the first year King George VI. The dot actually didn't signify anything. Apparently it was used to just balance the design of the coin. Not sure what that was really intending to mean, but in any case, we got a couple first-year King George VI, which is really cool. We do have a chance with these King George V nickels to find a rare variety. It's the 1932, and it's the near 6. So that's looking at the S and how close it is in cents to the rim. That's the near 6 for sure. And there are two varieties. There's the near 2 and the far 2. And what we want is the far 2. In a VG, it's worth hundreds of dollars. In a VG, now this coin has damage, but in a VG, in the near 2 is $1. So there's a big difference. And the way to tell is drawing a line from the tip of this leaf to the tip of that leaf. If the 2 basically touches that line, it's the near one, it's the less valuable. If the 2 is further down and would be considered far from that line, it's the valuable one. So let's take a peek at this one and see. All right, I got a piece of paper as a reference. I'm going to basically get this paper on the tip of those leaves, and you can see that that 2 is practically touching that line that would be drawn across the coin. So that's the common 1932 near 2, near S. But it's always good. If you've got any of these, scope it and just see, because that far 2 is quite rare. The key date in the early George VI nickels is the 1938, and there's a blank spot there. We didn't get a 38 or a 39, so we don't have that to look for, but there are lots of cool things. So we've got a bunch of 40s, 41s. 42 and 43, they introduced coins made of tombac, which is a kind of a brass alloy, so copper and zinc. And so 42 has a normal nickel dated 42, as well as one made of tombac. Would look very much the same with the beaver, but be the same color as that 43 next to it there. So that 43 is the Tomback 1943. They used Tomback because nickel was being used in the war effort. And we saw that the 44s and the 45s, these V nickels or victory nickels, are also not made of nickel, but these ones in particular were made of steel plated with chromium. And you can see that when the chromium would wear off, the coloring would change significantly, and they were really prone to rusting. So you can see a lot of these are in pretty rough shape and are rusting, but these are really cool little bits of history. And so we've got right up to 46, 47. We didn't get any 48s, 49, and then into the 60s, all the 50s into the 60s. Actually, there's a stack of 1951 commemoratives from, that's the 200 years of, nickel mining in Sudbury. And we do have a lone 1951, and there is a rare variety in 1951 we can look for. Here's our 1951, and as I mentioned, these are made of steel, and when they started minting these coins, they found that it was really hard to strike the beaver well in steel. It didn't come out as well as it did in nickel. And so what they ended up doing was changing the relief on the coin and lowering the relief, and so that it'd be easier to strike. And the only difference that you can find is very similar to those pennies we looked at, is to see on the obverse where the A in Gratia was pointing. The high relief, the very rare one that would be worth hundreds of dollars potentially, points to identical. And the very common low relief, that's this one here, points between those two identicals. So this is what we've got, is the common low relief 1951. It would have been really cool if we got the high relief, really valuable one, but not this time. We got a couple 53s here too, and there are some varieties we can look for. Particularly valuable is the 53 no shoulder fold, where the maple leaf at the top left there is near to the rim, and the shoulder fold where the leaf is far from the rim. Those ones are rare. I checked them. That's not what we got here. And I think we'll move down to the dimes, because we only got a small number of dimes here. But we did get some cool stuff. We got a 1930 dime here. It's got some toning on it. That's silver. That is 80% silver. And then we got a few other King George VI. There's a 46, a 51, and then an Elizabeth. That's a 67. Those are all 80% silver. And then we got our mackerel from 1967, and that one itself could be 50% or 80%. We don't have a really easy way to find out, but either way, it's silver, and that's cool. And then we got a short stack of pretty nice looking 1992s. So if I'll just check and make sure they appear to be uncirculated. There's a little bit of sort of spotting on them, but I'll tube those up probably with my uncirculated 92s. We got a small collection of quarters here. We got a 1967 Bobcat, just like the dime, the commemorative dime from 67. This could be 50% or it could be 80% silver. We got a short stack of 1973 RCMP commemoratives. I checked them all. We wanted to see if we've got the small bust or the large bust. This is the small bust. All of them are the small bust. Lots of detail on the hair. The rim is far away from the beads, or the beads are far away from the rim, however you want to look at it. So we got the common variety here. These examples here are all in circulated condition, so they don't draw premium. They are essentially worth face value, but that's okay. I will take them back to the bank and see if we can trade them in for some rolls where maybe we'll get a chance at silver. We also got some 50-cent pieces. We got 4 of them. We also got 7 $1 coins. These are the nickel dollars. They're not silver, and they don't really carry much of a premium. They're essentially worth face value, but you don't really see these very often. They don't really circulate. It would be very odd to see somebody going in and paying for anything at a store with what we used to know as a silver dollar. And a couple of loonies in pretty nice shape here from 1992. Again, they've got some spotting. I'll take a closer look. If they are uncirculated, I'll hold on to them. If not, we'll just toss them back. That's all right. We also got a collection of some really interesting things. So right here, I've got a bunch of English UK half pennies. The ones on the left are all King George V, and the ones on the right are all Queen Elizabeth II. And if you watched my video, you'll know that I have this little paperweight thing here that features that coin. There's a 1967 halfpenny, And that's what all of these are. This features some half pennies from King George VI and Queen Elizabeth II. And they've been, I think, dipped in something to make them golden color. But basically, they would be a bronze or copper coin like you see here. And we got a bunch of different years. I think there's only a couple of duplicates. And we even got one here from 1937. So that's really, really cool. We got a small handful of American coins. On the left, of course, we've got some Lincoln cents. That's a first year Lincoln Memorial of 59. That's a Denver. And on the right, we got a small stack of commemoratives of 1976. And these are all in pretty nice condition. Like there's not a lot of circulation wear. I'm somewhat aware that there are some varieties or errors we can check for on these coins, but I don't really know what they are. So I'm going to do a little research and see if I can find out what that is. You can see these coins have a pretty clean field. And if I can find out what that is, I'll know what to look for. But otherwise, this might be a bit of an upgrader to what I've got in my collection, which might be a circulated coin. Of the rest of the coins, these are probably the ones that are the most interesting. So we've got a Newfoundland penny, 1 cent from Newfoundland. That's King George VI, but that's a different crown portrait than what we see on the Canadian coin. So that makes it quite interesting. We've got a Dutch 10 cents from 1941, and clearly this has been used as jewelry. It's got some metal that's been sort of, I don't know, like welded on or whatever, and it's been taken out of something. Somebody had this as a jewelry piece. And then probably one of my favorites from this is this 1 shilling from 1917. We flip it over. George V. Again, it's the portrait that was used in Great Britain, not what was used on Canadian coinage for King George V. So that's really neat, but that's an old coin. It's over 100 years old, and it's sterling silver too. And then we got a collection of other interesting things, oddities. We got a coronation medallion for Queen Elizabeth. We got a royal visit medallion from 1939. That's actually a really cool one for sure. We've seen this before, the Apollo 11 mission. We saw this in my friend Kieran's collection, so I've got one of those. This is a Vatican medallion, really interesting. And we got a whole pile of foreign coins here. I'll have to go through. Most of them are from the 60s and 70s, but there's a 1 shilling from 1950. There's a few older ones in here from all over, and I love seeing that. And then here's speaking of interesting and oddities, here is a 1 penny from 1963 from the UK that was also probably made into jewelry. It's been dipped in something, so it's plated with something. And so it wouldn't have come like this. This was a copper coin, essentially, or bronze. So that is nice and smooth. But that's just kind of an interesting thing that we found here. And this is a bit of an odd coincidence. We also got something that should look familiar because I focused on one of these in a recent video. And that is now this is for a missionary church in Kitchener. But it's basically a dime savings book, and we found one of these in some coins that my aunt gave me. Now, in this case, these are all modern, newer, nickel-composed dimes. There aren't any in here that are made of silver, but that's just really neat, this little dime savings book. I guess they were all over the place. And I almost missed these here. These are actually really neat. These are meat rations from wartime. So Canada ration for meat, viande, which is French for meat. We got a few of them here. I'm going to have to find out a little bit more about them because I've never seen any of them before. I've got a few now. But that's an interesting piece of history. And as you know, I always like getting some older Canadian paper money. So we got a couple of $1 bills here. Now they both feature some writing on them, so they're not really worth much necessarily. And a whole bunch of $2 bills. They're lightly circulated. Probably the best ones are this one here. This is basically uncirculated. It doesn't have any creases or folds, so that's really cool. It's Bonin, Thiessen, and it's got the CBI prefix. So that's one. And then this here, I've put into a flip here. This is also Bonin, Thiessen, but this is actually 3 sequential bills. So there's, I think, 51, 52, 53 in the EGR prefix. So that was really neat as well. And last but not least, we got a whole collection of other oddities and strange things. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with these because I don't typically collect these, but We got a whole stack of Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest dollars from the 70s. We got several different years. And I lived for many years in Kitchener, and so that's actually really cool. Um, I don't know how collectible they are, if there's a market for them. I really don't know. There's a bunch here. I got like 6 or 7 of these Olympic sport medallions. This is from the Olympic Trust of Canada, and they feature different sports. So again, these I see them listed on eBay. People have them and are selling them. These ones are interesting. These are provincial and territorial coins. They indicate the year they came into Confederation. So Newfoundland is the last province to join Confederation in 1949. And they feature the provincial flower on the back. And there's 2 big stacks of them here. So I suspect I've got probably a complete collection of everything, hopefully, and maybe 2 or more. And then there's all sorts of oddities. We've got a Dairy Queen token. We've got McDollars. I can see if I can even redeem them. We have some. These are like really light. I think they're plastic with different Canadians of note. Jacques Cartier. We've got Simon Fraser. There's some other Olympic medallions. We've got wooden nickels. All of these wooden nickels in this huge pile are all from the same thing. The Old Boys Reunion in Hespeler from 1966. So I don't know if Monty's dad was an organizer or if he just was a real fan of those. There's another one there from Stainer, and there's a few more there. So just some different things. And some of you might remember these if you're from Canada. These were common back in the 80s with prime ministers of Canada. Now these are all, I don't know what they're composed of. Maybe they're zinc or something. They're starting to sort of like they're kind of chalky and the finish is odd. But they're different prime ministers. So Wilfrid Laurier and Lester B. Pearson. So there's a whole bunch of those here that I've got now in my collection, and a random Curling Association pin from Edmonton. And last up, we got a couple of Canada 125 commemorative sets here. They feature all of the provincial and territorial coins you can see sort of on that map of Canada, as well as the 1992 loonie that features the folks in front of the Parliament buildings. You can see the loonies have lost some of their luster in this packaging. I don't know if it's from the plastic that it's in. It doesn't seem to have affected the quarters. They're still uncirculated. They've been protected. And this loonie would be uncirculated as well, but some of its luster has been taken away by probably a reaction to the plastic, I think. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at this little collection that I purchased. I had fun going through everything. I'm hoping that you enjoyed looking through it as well. We found some pretty interesting things, little bits of treasure and little bits of history in coins. That's one of the reasons why I love collecting coins, because there's just so much to learn about the different countries and their history through their coinage. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, CAD Roll Hunter, please do that. I put out videos all the time, sometimes coin roll hunting, sometimes collection purchases. I do a wide variety of things, and you might find them interesting. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. We'll see you again next time.